In this video I'm going to take a look at how you go about scribing a Dovetail Tee Halving. So to start with, I have a Dovetail Tee Halving cut here with the trench taken out, and it was done where both pieces were measured individually and they were fitted together, and they've gone together pretty well, but there is a few little gaps that will be appearing in that there by comparison to see how we would get it with a scribe joint. So first thing that we would do is we would need a few of these tools here, the tri-square and the marking gauge, and you can see I'm positioning the piece down tight to the shoulders onto the piece in the location, whatever location I want to have my halving placed. I square the lines from the tail, which I've scribed onto this here. You need a really sharp edge in the pencil, and what we're going to do then is we're going to take the gauge and set it to the depth of the tail down on the piece here. You see I'm marking on my face edge again here. So this depth that we have of the tail, I take it to the piece, offer it up, and I'll gauge my line from the face edge down on that there. And the processing of this is going to be pretty much the same as what you would have with the pieces individually marked, but this time now it's going to match exactly what I have my tail cut to. And there's one other subtle difference. When we have to make our saw cuts or our saw lines for the edge to match up, what we want to do is we want to make absolutely certain that we cut on the side of the line. So I'm just highlighting here. There's small little bits of gaps in it, hard enough to see in the video, but we'll take a student's piece after this here and we'll take a look at how they got on with that. So I'll put the bench hook in here to cut the shoulder lines of the Dovetail Tee Halving here at the trench. And what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I'm staying inside of the pencil line. I want to leave the full pencil line on. So normally what you would do when you're cutting up to this, you're cut on the waist side, but you would try to cut as tight to the line as you possibly can. But in the scribe joint, you want to make sure that you leave the line on. So I've made my saw cut to the gauge line. Make sure it's down to both sides, and then I'm going to do the other side, starting with the heel of the saw, finger and thumb as a guide. Draw back on the saw as many times as you need to get it started, and then process that straight down to where the gauge line is, using the full length of the saw or the stroke of the saw. When I have that done, if you like, you can make another saw cut in the middle of the trench to make it a little easier to remove. And again, you want to make sure that the saw cut is straight and it's finishing exactly at the gauge line, because when the chisel is used, the chisel can only take out to wherever the saw line has been made. So if the saw line goes too deep, the chisel will try and go too deep, and if it hasn't been taken out enough, it'll only go down as far as your saw line. So now what I'm doing is I'm placing it into the vise, and I'm going to go through the process of trenching, which is pretty much the same as trenching in a straightforward halving joint. So the chisel and mallet being used together. When you're finished with these here, don't hold one up, let it down. Put the chisel at quite an angle. You can see I'm steadying the chisel on the edge by using it with the mallet and working up towards the middle of the piece to take out the trench. So it's about halfway. I turn it around and I repeat the process from the opposite side. Now one side will most likely come out a little bit cleaner than the other depending on the type of the piece of wood, and you can see it's coming out a little bit rough from that side there on me, so I finish it down towards the middle at a steep angle, take small amounts off each time, and I'm going to turn it around to the side that I started with, and that's the side that I'm going to use to finish the piece level. This time now I'm going to use the mallet again. I'm putting the chisel perfectly level, and that's why I set it onto the top of the piece to start with, and chisel to just that you're leaving a little bit of the saw line still on. And I'm going to finish it from this side here because it seemed to get a bit rough as I moved down the piece. Take the bench hook, place it on the floor, you use it to elevate your right knee. You can see that I'm resting my left elbow on my left knee to steady myself and position myself correctly, that I'm not too far away from the bench, and both hands behind the cutting edge of the chisel, and I process or clean the piece across just to where the saw lines are on the piece. I want to make sure that it's just maybe the faintest little bit of saw line left on that there, very, very little. Both hands behind the cutting edge and clean the trench across. You can see I'm penciling there now where the middle line was, and I'm just going to clean it off till it's no longer visible, and that there should have me perfectly down to where the halfway mark would have been on the trench. I'm doing the process as well too from the opposite side. I think maybe I might get a little bit cleaner from that side, so I've moved myself. You can see I'm not trying to chisel from the same position. There's a little bit of frays coming up at the edge here, and I'm going to show you how to clean those off. Both hands behind the cutting edge, good control over the chisel, arms by the side so that you're not overextending. Now I place the piece onto the bench, to put my thumb on top of the chisel, both hands behind the cutting edge, and I put the weight of my shoulder straight down onto the piece, onto the chisel, to clean out those edges. And repeat the process from the other side. And as you can see, there's not really a lot of wood in that there. It may look worse than it was. And I'm going to remove my piece now, and I'm going to offer it into the piece that I've scribed. It seems to be pretty tight, and it's really, really snug fit. If I wanted to clean a little bit off, I'd probably use a chisel again, like I used just prior to that there. A student was pointing out to me that the top edge of the tail is a little bit higher off the opposite side, that it's not perfectly flush, which that can actually be cleaned in place as well. So but you can see that the joint is just an absolutely perfect snug fit by scribing the joint. And again, the beauty of it is, if my piece is anyway off, my scribe is going to match the piece that I've taken out the trench that I've marked on it. And you can see here, this is a common mistake with students making this when we're marking each of the sides, to be a little bit too tight on the lines, not on the waist side, or maybe going slightly off in their shape. But if the scribe was used, you can still match this perfectly.